This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I hope you all had a happy holiday. I hope you all had a good, New Year's, everything like that. We got a lot to talk about in today's episode. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. First of all, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can do it really easily, really quickly. Just go to the main page of our show, the GSMC Sports Podcast, and whatever you're listening to this on, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you'll see probably in the top right-hand corner-ish, or maybe even dead center, a little button that just has a plus sign next to it and also says subscribe. If you could hit that button for us, that would mean the absolute world to us. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you want to get those alerts and those notifications on your phone, on your laptop, on your watch, on whatever device you might be listening to this on. And again, you'll get those alerts and notifications, and you'll know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. When we release it, you won't have to go look at Twitter or just go, check casually. You'll get those alerts whenever they are released, and then you can, be one of the first people to listen to a new episode again when we release it. So please, if you could subscribe to the podcast on our main page, whatever application or even website you're listening to this on, Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, please subscribe to us on all those great platforms. We would really appreciate it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. Also, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general if you are enjoying the content and discussion points of the show, the production, everything that goes on behind the scenes with our great team as well. So if you're just enjoying the show overall, we'd love it if you leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same main page, on that same website or application. Again, Spotify, Apple Podcasts or Podbean. You can leave us a review. If you want to write something, you can do that as well, but as long as you just leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, we would really appreciate that if you are enjoying the content of this show just in general. So again, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, in general, anything like that. And also, if you could give us a follow on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Just overall, we would love to interact with you guys more on there. So if you follow us on all of those great social media platforms, again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Over on social media, we can talk about sports. We can talk about, maybe some NFL playoff games, maybe whatever the main NBA game is on that night on TNT or ESPN. But just overall on social media, we can talk to you guys, again, about sports breaking news, about anything sports related that you guys want to talk about. Social media is the place to do that, especially in real time. Again, with the, landscape of the NFL and NBA always changing, player movement, games happening, trades, injuries, whatever it may be. Social media is the best way to find our immediate reaction, maybe, or something like that. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would absolutely love it. In addition to subscribing to the podcast and leaving us that review, if you could follow us on all those great social media platforms. One more time, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy, healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have a fantastic show for you all today. Coming up later on in the episode, I do want to get to Zach Wilson's Pro Day, a comparison I've been hearing a lot that I think is interesting. We'll talk a little bit about Zach Wilson, what the Jets are also going to do with Sam Darnold. I have two teams that are apparently rumored to be interested in, the Broncos and the Panthers. I'll tell you why I think one of those is a better fit, and I honestly expect Sam to go to that team. I think it'd be a great fit, so we'll talk about that later on in the episode, as well as the dilemma that the Miami Dolphins are going to face with the 6th overall pick. It's looking like they're going to decide between between Devonta Smith and Kyle Pitts in a little over 3 weeks' time for the NFL draft. So I'll do sort of Devonta Smith versus Kyle Pitts, specifically for the Miami Dolphins, which one makes more sense and why. I want to tell you why there's one running back in this class, and a very good running back class in my opinion, that is better than everybody else and should be taken further than anybody else. I'll talk about him. I also talk about potentially, if we have some time, another Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packer. Interesting quote came out. Could Rodgers be leaving Green Bay sooner than we think? That's also coming up later on in the show. And towards the end of the episode, I do want to get to some major NBA storylines like Andre Drummond's impact for the Lakers, DeMarcus Cousins signing with the Los Angeles Clippers on a 10-day contract, some concerns I have with Kevin Durant and really the Brooklyn Nets, why Zion Williamson, in my opinion, is living up to the hype as a generational talent, and I will give you my top 10 players in the NBA right now. So again, we have an absolutely packed show for you all today, but we're going to start off with more speculation about the third overall pick in the NFL draft, which was obviously recently acquired by the San Francisco 49ers, and immediately following the trade, Kyle Shanahan had a press conference and was asked a bunch of questions. And essentially, it came out, obviously, since my last episode, that Kyle Shanahan was going to go to Mac Jones' pro day, which has happened since, and I will talk about Mac Jones' pro day. But let's take it back a couple of days now. When Kyle Shanahan was asked why he went to Mac Jones' pro day and not Trey Lance's pro day, because Trey Lance's pro day already happened, Kyle Shanahan was not there, and he also wasn't going to Justin Fields' first pro day, because they were on the same day. Mac Jones' pro day in Alabama and Justin Fields' first pro day were on the same day, so they chose to go to Mac Jones' instead. And when asked about that, Kyle Shanahan said that he didn't want to give away, anything by going to a pro day or anything like that. But now that they've traded up to the third overall pick, the exact quote was, "You don't have to hide as many things." Now, there's two directions in which this quote can be taken into. There's the way that Twitter took it and social media took it, and then there's the way I'm taking it. And I want to explain both of them, because again, I'm not saying necessarily the way I am interpreting this quote is correct. People on Twitter and social media and the speculation could also be correct, and that this is a hint that they are going to be selecting Alabama Mac Jones quarterback at 3. So if you want to dissect the quote, again, he was saying we don't have to hide as much now that we own that third overall pick. Now that we've made the trade, again, letting teams know of our plans in discreet ways isn't necessarily a worry anymore, considering we know what the first two picks of the draft are going to be, which is Trevor Lawrence 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars and BYU quarterback Zach Wilson 2 to the New York Jets. So again, it's true. He doesn't necessarily have to hide as much. There isn't any speculation. There isn't any last second. They know it's the third overall pick. They're going to take a quarterback. It's going to be one of Mac Jones, Trey Lance, or Justin Fields. It's going to be one of those three guys. We know that. And yes, obviously Kyle Shanahan didn't go to Trey Lance's pro day, went to Mac Jones' pro day over Justin Fields' first pro day. So again, the tea leaves would signal that, hey, they're really interested in Mac Jones, and they may take him third overall. And do I believe Mac Jones is in the discussion for third overall? Absolutely. There's a reason why he went to the pro day. But do I believe that quote that Kyle Shanahan said, which again was, we don't have to hide as many things now that we own the third overall pick, means, oh yeah, it's locked and loaded. They are 100% taking Mac Jones at the third overall pick, yada, yada, yada. No, I don't believe so. And honestly, my initial reaction, like I said in my last episode to the trade, was, oh, it's going to be Trey Lance. Because, again, Trey Lance is this guy who's got all the traits in the world, is not ready to start year one. Again, you want to talk about Mac Jones and Justin Fields being ready to start year one? Both. I think Mac Jones, no matter where he goes, it could play year one. Again, I don't know what sitting's going to do him any justice. I think what you see with Mac Jones is what you get. I don't see a lot of potential with him. I'll get into that in a minute. But I think he's ready to start whenever you draft him. Same thing with Justin Fields. I think he's NFL ready. Zach Wilson, NFL ready. Trevor Lawrence, NFL ready. I think those four guys can all start week one for your franchise. I think Trey Lance maybe needs a little bit more time to develop, specifically since he's also had a year off of football because of the COVID year. I think that would help him a lot too. But since they were talking about keeping Jimmy Garoppolo, I really thought that, okay, Trey Lance is going to be the guy. And I still think Trey Lance is definitely in the discussion. But it's looking more like it's going to be Mac Jones or Justin Fields based off reports. Again, smoke screens are everything. But I don't know another opportunity where San Francisco is going to get a look at Trey Lance. Justin Fields is having a second pro day in April, so they will be able to see him even though they missed him to view Mac Jones. But going back to the quote, this is how I interpreted the quote. So again, Twitter was saying, okay, well, this means that Kyle Shanahan basically admitted that they're taking Mac Jones. That's how people reacted on Twitter. They thought that was an open conversation and essentially Kyle Shanahan saying, yeah, we traded up for the third overall pick to take Mac Jones and we're taking him. I don't think that's what Kyle Shanahan meant. I think that's just the way people are interpreting it. I think the way Kyle Shanahan meant in his quote, what he was really saying was, well, look, we were sitting at 12 and we didn't want to let teams like Miami, or not Miami, teams like Carolina, teams like New England, teams like the Saints, teams like maybe the Steelers, teams like Philadelphia, teams who are ahead of San Francisco at the time of the draft order, who are all above 12, who might be looking for a quarterback. They didn't want to tip off the hat that, hey, if we go to translate, I mean, if you see Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch at Trey Lance's pro day in San Francisco, you know he's not going to make it to pick 12. So people would just assume San Francisco's trying to trade up, and that would drive up the price of a first-round pick, like the third overall pick, like they traded for. Or other teams would be like, oh, crap, they're going to move up ahead of us. We got to call Miami. We got to move up. So they didn't want to tip their hand. That is the way I'm interpreting this quote. I think that because they didn't want to give away the fact that they were trading up to 3 is why he didn't go to a guy like Trey Lance's pro day or talk about some of these other quarterback prospects. And now that he's made the trade to 3, they can look at all these guys without fear of somebody else jumping them or trading up, because nobody's jumping San Francisco for a quarterback. Now, I also believe that they love multiple quarterbacks in this draft. I don't think they're dead set on one guy just yet. They have a whole month of the process to go through. They still have another pro day for Justin Fields. They're going to go to, I'm sure, private workouts, interviews, all that stuff. I don't think the decision's been set in stone. But you, and as in San Francisco, can't trade up to love one guy, right? I don't think they're done with their process, but they have to know that they have to love one of Mac Jones, Trey Lance, or Justin Fields. Those are the only 3 options that they have at pick 3, and I can guarantee you one of those 3 guys will be getting picked there. Because again, we know Jacksonville's taking Trevor Lawrence, and Zach Wilson's being picked by the New York Jets. And again, the San Francisco 49ers have Jet connections with Robert Saleh. I'm sure they've been told, hey, they were talking, and we're about to move up. Are you going to take this guy? Blah, blah. No, okay, we're going to take Fields, or I'm going to take Wilson. And they move up, and now they have that 3rd overall pick. So that's what I think what Kyle Shanahan meant. I don't think it was like an open and honest or really, confession that, hey, yeah, we traded up to take Mac Jones, and now that we have the 3rd overall pick, we can say that. That's not, I don't think, what Kyle Shanahan was saying. I think it was more we didn't want to tip our hand that we were trading up so we could get outbid by a team like Philly, like Carolina, like New England, teams like that. Now, while it is harder to explain why did Kyle Shanahan go to Mac Jones's pro day and not Justin Fields, a couple of reasons. One, Justin Fields still has a second pro day in which Kyle Shanahan is expected to attend to. That's one option. And 2, I think that they're more sold on Justin Fields and Trey Lance's prospects than they are on Mac Jones. So they wanted to see Mac Jones in person. They wanted to see what all the hype's about. They wanted to see why teams are saying that he's going 8 to Carolina or 15 to New England or even top 10 to Denver like some people have speculated. Or again, 4 to Atlanta or 3 to somebody else now. They wanted to see what the hype was all about. So Mac Jones has this pro day in front of many scouts, including both John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan were there, Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots were there. It was a very big day for Mac Jones. It was so big, in fact, that his teammates who knew how big of a day it was for him decided to participate in the pro day. So Devonta Smith, even though he had essentially a broken finger that was still purple apparently, was catching passes and running routes from Mac Jones. And Najee Harris, the running back, was also participating in the pro day, trying to help Mac Jones out, boost his stock and things like that. And according to reports, and I've watched the pro day, you can view it on YouTube on the NFL's channel, it wasn't great. And again, I don't hold a ton of stock into pro days. I don't, when you're talking about what really matters, I think the number one thing that matters when you're scouting, not just a quarterback, but really any player in the National Football League, is tape. That's obviously the number one thing. That probably takes about between 50 and 70% of your pie of what matters when evaluating a prospect. I think the interview is really important. I think you talking, knowing what your organization believes in, how it's run, what the work ethic, what was required, the location, everything like that. To be able to sit down face-to-face or on Zoom or whatever and talk to this prospect, get a feel for them, their personality, their leadership style, specifically quarterbacks, I think the interview is really important. And then after that, you could fall into sort of the combine pro day thing where it's, well, do we really care about a 40-yard time? I don't know. I think 40-yard dashes are a little bit overrated. What I care more about is sort of like advanced analytics. If you look at Amazon Web Services, I'm sure you've seen the commercials, they're able to track guys now and how fast they run on the football field in a live game with pads on, sweating, all that good stuff. That's the speed I care about. I don't necessarily care about how fast can you run in a straight line. I more care about, hey, how do you do with the football in your hands and things like that. But I understand why it's important, specifically for receivers and running backs, and with receivers and tight ends, the vertical jump, and for some of the 3-cone drills for some offensive linemen are really important with footwork and things like that. So again, it's not a 0% or anything like that, but I don't think it's huge. Now, I think pro days are an interesting concept in regards it's separate from the combine because there is time for guys to get better between the time their season ends and now. For example, I think Trey Lance's pro day was extremely important for him, more than like 10% of the pie or whatever you want to do when you're talking about evaluating a quarterback. Because Trey Lance had taken a whole year off of football, and people wanted to see, have you improved? Are you more than the guy that's on tape? Or are you at least the guy that we see on tape? So it was important for him. Mac Jones, same thing. He's been told a lot of times he's limited. We know what Mac Jones can do. We know he's accurate. We know that he's cerebral. We know that he can put the guy, he can give the ball to the playmakers and things like that. But we also know he's not very mobile, that the system he was running wasn't, necessarily stacked against him. He had the best O-line, the best receivers, all that good stuff. The same thing we hear with every guy coming out of a big-time program like this that came off a national championship. So for a pro day, if I were a coach or something like that, I would like to show off what Mac Jones can do for sure. His standard, the deep ball, the three-step drop, some play action, some pump fake stuff. I understand that. You want to show it off what Mac Jones is good at. But I think a pro day is really an opportunity, specifically for a quarterback, to end the narratives on some of the things he's quote-unquote limited in. Whatever your weakness is, on your draft card or whatever, on your draft report, that people are saying about you, that scouts are saying about you, prove them wrong on that pro day in front of everybody. So what would I have liked to see out of Mac Jones' pro day? Throws on the run. Off-platform throws. Because Mac Jones is not good at those off-platform, off-script plays. And the future of the NFL, like I've tried to tell everybody, is off-platform throws. Is this crazy elastic arm talent something that Trevor Lawrence possesses, something that Zach Wilson certainly possesses, something that, in my opinion, Justin Fields possesses, something, in my opinion, that Trey Lance possesses? They've got this unique playmaking off-script ability. So for when things to break down or you have to throw at a weird angle, you still make the play. I don't see that from Mac Jones. For Mac Jones, I see your standard three-step drop, Kirk Cousins quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, that delivers to the guy he's supposed to when the guy is open. But anything goes wrong whatsoever, poor O-line, bad defense, hell, just a bad day, and the guy looks like he can't play and he should be a backup. And for me, San Francisco's not going to take Mac Jones. I don't believe I'm going to buy into this hype. Again, a guy in Chris Sims, who was Kyle Shanahan's roommate in college, said he would be shocked if it wasn't Mac Jones. And I understand where they're coming from. Mac Jones fits the prototypical guy that you would want to see in a Kyle Shanahan offense. That we've seen, I should say. Not that we want to see, that we've seen in a Kyle Shanahan offense. Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins in Washington. All of these guys are your standard 6'3", 6'4" pocket passers that are cerebral and accurate. We know that works in the Kyle Shanahan system. It's been limited, though. We know Kyle Shanahan is this incredible, young, gifted, offensive-minded coach that comes from a legacy of a football family. And yes, we know that he's one of the smarter young coaches in the league. But let's be clear, he's got one winning season as the San Francisco 49ers head coach. He's blown 2 Super Bowl leads now, and I think we've realized the ceiling of the Shanahan system with the typical Shanahan quarterback. You can get to the Super Bowl, but you're going to lose it to somebody better, to somebody special, like Tom Brady, like Patrick Mahomes. Where's the special with Mac Jones? Where's the special with Kirk Cousins? Where's the special with Jimmy Garoppolo? Special wins Super Bowls. Special wins MVPs. I see special in Trey Lance with his running ability. I see special in Justin Fields with his leadership ability and also his playmaking. Same thing with Zach Wilson. We know Trevor Lawrence is special. Where is it with Mac Jones? Why is Mac Jones going to be any better than Jimmy Garoppolo at their apexes of their career? Or Kirk Cousins? Or Matt Ryan. And I don't think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch should be shooting for Matt Ryan, who, yes, won an MVP that year. I think they should be shooting for something bigger. I think they should be shooting for a Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, somebody like that. And I don't think Mac Jones can give that to you. I think, as we've been saying for years, I know the Deshaun Watson things off the field are sketchy and they have to get taken care of or, settled, whatever it may be. For a mobile quarterback to be in the Shanahan system would be something new and exciting that we'd all like to see. We've always talked about Shanahan getting a mobile guy who's more of a playmaking athlete than others, and I think that's what Kyle Shanahan's going to do in this year's draft. I think he's done with the standard mold that he's been using, which is the Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo pocket passer mold. Not that I don't think Mac Jones can't play, but again, he had all the stats last year. 4,500 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. I get that. And I understand he's accurate and he broke the record with completion percentage. He'd be a great fit with the New Orleans Saints or maybe even the New England Patriots at 15 or something like that. But you don't trade up to the 3rd overall pick, right? And give up your future through 2 other first-round picks in the next 2 years. You're giving up all that for a guy who doesn't give you anything special. I don't think that's the way the NFL draft works, and I don't think that's how Kyle Shanahan's going to operate. I think he's going to go after a different guy. And we'll talk about why I think Justin Fields and Trey Lance are really good meshes for Kyle Shanahan in the next segment, as well as some other NFL topics. We'll get into all that great stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you my initial sort of thoughts and spiel on the Mac Jones to San Francisco rumors. Again, while he does fit the stereotypical mode of accurate, cerebral, pocket passing, pretty quick delivery quarterback that Kyle Shanahan loves to work with, like Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, I just think Kyle Shanahan must realize, and probably John Lynch does too, that type of quarterback presents them with a ceiling, that it appears that if they get them a great defense, great offensive system like Shanahan has, great run game, great weapons, you can get to a Super Bowl, but you haven't been able to win one yet. Same thing with happened in Atlanta, that happened in San Fran. They blew leads to special quarterbacks like Mahomes and Tom Brady. And a lot of people are comparing Mac Jones to Tom Brady. In fact, they say that, he's more mobile. Tom Brady's cerebral. He doesn't look the part. He's got the dad bod. Tom Brady is not some guy that can be replicated. I think that a lot of guys get the comparison to all-time greats, and I think it's unfair. I remember Joe Burrow got some comparisons last year. Tom Brady is the greatest football player of all time because of his football IQ. He's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, he's not the best at anything physically, but mentally he is so far and away better than anybody else on that football field that he's already won the down or the possession when he walks on the field. That's just how Tom Brady operates. I don't think Mac Jones can do that. I don't think Mac Jones is so football IQ away and far and away better than everybody else like Tom Brady is, where he's winning snaps before the ball's even hiked, that he already knows what the defense is going to do before they even do it. Stuff like that the all-time greats have, that Tom Brady does. Tom Brady is the only quarterback that has that. He's the only one of the all-time great quarterbacks that doesn't have something special physically. And I don't think Mac Jones has anything special physically. And if you want to say, Drew Brees doesn't have anything special physically, he's the most accurate football thrower of all time. So that's your special. He's got a pretty, and again, at least in his heyday, had a cannon of an arm. And Drew Brees had special leadership qualities too. I don't see anything with Mac Jones. I know he's a great leader. I know he's a captain. I know all this stuff, and I know he can deliver the ball and put the ball in the right spot on screens. I know everyone loves to rant and rave about his ball placement on screens and stuff like that. I understand. But I don't see anything special. And I think if Mac Jones was the guy that the 49ers were locked into, I don't think they would have traded all the way up to 3. I think they would have maybe traded up to 9 or 10 max to get a guy like that. Because I think a lot of people in NFL circles agree that Mac Jones is not the top 4 quarterbacks. I think it's 1 Lawrence, 2 Zach Wilson, 3 Justin Fields, 4 Trey Lance, 5 Mac Jones. That's how I believe a lot of people and a lot of teams have it. So let's get into those guys. And I want to specifically talk about Justin Fields because I've talked about Trey Lance a lot, and I don't want to give you the same stats or the same argument over and over again. Justin Fields, in my opinion, is one of the least talked about prospects in this draft, but has a chance to be a top 3 player in this class, or if not top 2, honestly. Because when you want to look about these quarterbacks, and for years it's always been about Trevor Lawrence, and yes, I think Trevor Lawrence will be the best player in this class, probably the most remembered player in this class, but there's guys like Kyle Pitts, who I'll get to, Devonta Smith, Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase, who are all going to be special players. This draft class is loaded on the offensive side of the ball. But just a year ago, we were talking about if Justin Fields could pass Trevor Lawrence as the number 1 overall draft pick, and it appears that ever since the season has ended, somehow Justin Fields has done worse. Despite this season, in just, I think, 8 games, putting up a 70% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. So if you want to translate that to an NFL schedule, which is now 17 games, by the way, but let's go to 16, be 4,000 yards, 44 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 70% completion percentage. Oh, that would win you the MVP in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying he's going to put up those numbers in the NFL. Hell, I don't think he will. But what Justin Fields is going to get that nobody else is going to get is he's going to land with probably a good team, right? You want to talk about all the teams that are looking for a quarterback besides those top 2, right? The Jags and the Jets are bad teams, right? They're bad teams looking for a quarterback to fix their bad team. But then you get to San Francisco, and hell, I think Justin Fields should be the selection at 3. Now, I want to say, yes, in my earlier episode, I said I think it will be Trey Lance. And I still think, I don't know exactly what I think anymore. I think if I had to bet money on it, I think they'll be taking Trey Lance. I think the traits thing and the year away thing. But if I had to say, if I was San Francisco, who I would pick, again, there's a difference between what I would do versus what's being reported. I think they should take Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is the Justin Herbert of this draft class. There's always a guy each and every year that is overly scrutinized, that is overly nitpicked, that is overly analyzed because of prospect fatigue. We had heard about Justin Herbert for years. You got to remember, the year before Justin Herbert declared, there were talks about him being the first quarterback taken off the board after Kyler Murray. So again, people were talking about Justin Herbert entering the NFL in Kyler Murray's draft class, where he would have gone once to the Cardinals, and the Giants, instead of taking Daniel Jones, would have taken Justin Herbert. And that was the plan, that he was supposed to be QB2 of that class behind all that. Everybody loved Justin Herbert then. Nobody nitpicked Justin Herbert. Nobody said he didn't have the intangibles. Nobody said he didn't play in a good system. Everybody was all in on Justin Herbert at that point. But when guys stay for an extra year and go through another season doing essentially the same thing, maybe a slightly improvement, guys are going to get nitpicked. They're going to lose the big game. They're going to have a not great performance. I think Oregon had a bad one against Auburn. Herbert didn't play as great as his senior season in college in that one game. But there's always another signature moment. Oh, there's that Rose Bowl game for Justin Herbert that was incredible. And that's what got him. He wasn't the first quarterback taken. Hell, he wasn't the second quarterback taken. But he's the one who wins Rookie of the Year because he lands in LA with an incredible offensive unit and weapons and things like that allow him to put up those types of numbers. Whoever lands in San Francisco, in my opinion, has the best chance at becoming the winningest quarterback in this draft class. Right? We know Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville are going to be a pair. Well, I think Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in this class and the most talented. I'm not exactly sure he's going to win the most games out of the two. I can't trust the Jets either with Zach Wilson. I have some questions about him as well. So I don't know if he's going to win the most. But you put whoever is taken by San Francisco, who's already been to a Super Bowl in the last year, with Nick Mullins and a battered-up roster last year, beat teams like the Rams multiple times. It's a good team with a good coach in Kyle Shanahan, and I think whoever's picked by them has the best chance at being the player that they want to be and are supposedly projected to be. So this is a huge pick. This could make or break a lot of guys' career. And like I'm saying, whoever gets drafted by San Francisco, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Mac Jones, I think will win a lot of football games. Even if Mac Jones is selected by San Francisco, I think they'll win a lot of football games. But Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields have always been the quarterback discussion. Go back to Justin Fields' QB1 days when he was part of that Netflix documentary. Him and Trevor Lawrence grew up not too far from each other, and it's always been 1 and 2. Who do you have number 1? Who do you have number 2? Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. Then they go to competing schools, right? Justin goes to Georgia, eventually transfers to Ohio State. And Lawrence goes to Clemson. They face off many times in the playoffs. Lawrence gets the best of Fields the first time, and obviously the signature moment, I think, in Justin Fields' entire Ohio State career is how he did in that semifinal game versus Clemson. I really do believe that. So when you want to take a look at it from top down, I think, again, if you want to make the comparison to like I am between Herbert and Fields. Herbert had that bad game against Auburn. I think there was another game against USC he didn't play great in, but he had that moment in the Rose Bowl that really solidified him as this is what Justin Herbert could be. Right? If everything's put together, if you let him loose, if you let him run, if you let him do all that. Chargers saw that, took that, and that's the player he is for the Chargers. Justin Fields, same thing. He had a bad game against Northwestern. We can all agree that it was not great against a really, really good defense with a lot of NFL players on it. But he has that signature game against Clemson where you're like, wow, the deep ball accuracy, the mobility, the toughness. Again, you got to remember when he got cracked down in the ribs, he took a huge shot from a linebacker in that Clemson game, finished out the game and had the game of his absolute life. He got better when he got hurt in the bigger game, in the bigger moment. Sure, he didn't beat Alabama at the national championship level. Who was going to beat that team? It was far and away the best team in the NFL, or in the college football. But Justin Fields has that signature game, and again, his sophomore season, 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. This year in only 8 games, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. In my opinion, he is the best combination of NFL-ready and special traits for San Francisco to take. I understand that they talk about Jimmy Garoppolo and how great of a guy he is, and the reason why I said, and I still believe that Trey Lance will be the one they actually pick. Again, it's not what I would do. I would take Justin Fields over Trey Lance, but I think San Francisco is going to take Trey Lance because they do want to run it with Jimmy Garoppolo this year because they do believe they have a Super Bowl roster. And again, throwing a rookie quarterback in the toughest division in football, when maybe the best coach division in football besides maybe the AFC East, which is crazy to say, thinking about how the AFC East has been the last 20 years. If you want to add that layer to it, with a bunch of new coaches on that staff, both offensively and defensively, because a lot of guys got plucked from their staff for different hirings and things like that, maybe you do want to have some QB stability from the guy who's been there a couple of years for this year, which is why I do believe they'll take Trey Lance, because Trey Lance has the highest ceiling out of anybody in this class, not named Trevor Lawrence or maybe Zach Wilson, right? But Justin Fields can start week 1. And Justin Fields has special traits just like Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Lance have. Today, Justin Fields ran a 4.40 and was the fastest quarterback running time, I think, in NFL history, or maybe it was only second to somebody, I think to RG3. I think RG3 might have technically ran a faster 40 time than him. He's got all the tools. He's currently listed at 6'3", 228 pounds. Again, he was a junior this year, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I like him a lot, and the pro comparison I put out there for Justin Fields is Dak Prescott. I think Dak Prescott, if you look at the college style, the mobility, the arm strength, what does he struggle with? A little bit of accuracy issues, but nobody's a perfect quarterback walking into this draft class. But what Justin Fields has is toughness, he has leadership, he has incredible mobility, he's built like a running back. Similar to how Dak Prescott is built where you're like, wow, his legs, they're huge. He's built like a running back from sort of the torso down. He can sort of run over guys, not just run by them. A different build than what like Lamar Jackson and Michael Vick and RG3 were built, right? Justin Fields is more built like Dak Prescott. He is the perfect pro comparison for him. I see a lot of Dak Prescott in Justin Fields, in their play style, in their leadership style as well, in their toughness. Again, Dak Prescott is a tough SOB. You know that he's going to come there and play every single week unless there's an incredibly sad injury like his ankle one this year. He's got the deep ball accuracy. He's got everything, but similar to Dak Prescott, for whatever reason he gets a little bit overly scrutinized, overly nitpicked. But that game Justin Fields had against Trevor Lawrence is something that I just can't get out of my head. Trevor Lawrence has been a quarterback prodigy and anointed the king of football, essentially college football, of quarterback prospects, since both him and Justin Fields were in high school, right? They both come from Georgia. They grew up rivals. They've been rivals their whole life. And for the last word, the last college matchup before they go pro between Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields outplayed Trevor Lawrence, who's been his rival essentially since he was 15 years old. And that's just something that sticks with you, in my opinion. I think San Francisco it'd be a home run if they got Justin Fields. I would play him right away if I were San Francisco, and I think he would have the success that Dak Prescott had his rookie year. That 13-3, those incredible stats, winning rookie of the year. I think that would be a serious conversation for Justin Fields if he landed in San Francisco, but that's obviously the age-old question. Who will draft him? And where? Will he go 3 to San Francisco? Could he drop all the way to maybe top 10 and New England trades up or something like that? Whoever gets Justin Fields is going to get a tough leader who, in my opinion, is just a little bit overly scrutinized because of prospect fatigue. And again, I think Trey Lance is incredible as well. So for the rest of this segment, I do want to talk about the New York Jets because Zach Wilson did just have his pro day recently. And it was fun. It was awesome. It was electric. It showed off everything you wanted to see him. And honestly, the biggest vibe that I got away from the pro day was, yeah, I understand it's against air, it's against no defense, but I really saw that elastic arm that really does jump off tape. He was doing some crazy throws that he was obviously showing off on purpose during the pro day to get a lot of teams interested in things like that. And the ball almost comes out of his hands similar to the way Aaron Rodgers does. It's a quick flip. It spins a lot. It doesn't necessarily spin a lot, but it gets there quick. It's got high velocity. He's got the crazy arm angles. And what Zach Wilson really showed off is his ability to do off-platform throws. So after the pro day, after the film, I can officially say that, yes, I agree with the New York Jets' decision to move off of Sam Darnold and add Zach Wilson, because I am very, very high on Sam Darnold. I think he's a great player, and I think he just hasn't been done right in the current situation that he's in New York. But I think when he is eventually traded to a new team, good things could happen to him, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But going back to Zach Wilson, again, I think he's going to start day one for the New York Jets team. And again, his off-platform throw ability, his athletic ability, he can run in a similar way to Justin Fields as well. He's got all of that. The only thing I'm concerned about with him is the level of competition he played with in college, and when there's pressure in his face from specifically bigger defensive linemen and tackles, he tends to shrink and play a little bit smaller than he is. But again, nobody's a perfect prospect walking to the NFL, not even Trevor Lawrence, who obviously, in my opinion, needs to beef up a little bit. and also can struggle with some accuracy issues along the hashes and things like that. But all in all, I think Zach Wilson is a great prospect. But after this short break, we will be getting to Sam Darnold, where I believe he will be going next season and why. We'll get into the Sam Darnold conversation and who should the Miami Dolphins pick at 6. It's been reported it's down to Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, and Devonta Smith. We'll get into all that great stuff right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you sort of a breakdown of Justin Fields and why I believe he would be my pick if I were John Lynch, the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. Again, I think he has the best combination of NFL readiness and sort of playmaking ability in terms of, comparing to the guys who will be available. Again, I'm not counting Lawrence or Wilson in that comparison because they will obviously be gone 1 and 2. Now, just because I think Justin Fields should be the pick for San Francisco, I don't think he's actually going to be the pick there. He's not like my prediction, so that's what I would do if I was John Lynch. But if I had to predict as of right now, based off reports, based off things, just everything in general, where San Francisco will be going with the 3rd overall pick, I still think it's going to be Trey Lance. I think even though they didn't go to the Pro Day, I think they knew enough. And again, when Kyle Shanahan was talking about the quote, the specific question was, why didn't you go to Trey Lance's Pro Day, or why did you go to Mac Jones over Justin Fields? One of the reasons why he might not have gone to Trey Lance's Pro Day is because he didn't want to tip teams off that they were trying to trade up for Trey Lance, who, according to a lot of people, has a higher grade on NFL draft boards than the media does. So there's a lot of guys in the NFL who the media are higher on than the others or agents are higher on. It appears that the media is higher on, Justin Fields and maybe Mac Jones more than the NFL is, and they actually view Trey Lance higher. So I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if Trey Lance goes 3rd overall. I want to transition now and sort of stay on topic with the New York Jets, who I talked a little bit about last segment, because I want to talk about Sam Darnold. Now, one of the final pieces of this quarterback carousel is obviously the draft, right? Teams who need a new quarterback will eventually get them. There's been a crazy NFL offseason when it comes to Stafford and Goff and Wilson. Deshaun Watson could still get traded, though there are some off-the-field things he's going through right now legally, so I don't think he's going to be moved anytime soon. But one of the final pieces of quarterback movement, again, Andy Dalton's been moved, Ryan Fitzpatrick has moved on. It's been Sam Darnold, and he was one of the guys that I thought would have gotten moved sooner rather than later. Obviously, the quarterback for the New York Jets will no longer be the quarterback for the New York Jets. Eventually, when they draft Zach Wilson, they will move off of Sam Darnold. Now, there was a report that came out today that they're totally willing to have Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson in the same room, competing against each other, yada, yada, yada. Don't buy any of it. They will be moving off of Sam Darnold. That translates to we're not getting enough offers, right? When teams leak stuff like that, that's like, oh, we're going to make it uncomfortable. We're going to it's totally fine. We'll have both of them in the same room. We'll go into the controversy instead of avoiding it by trading one of the guys. They're always going to trade one of the dudes. They're never going to have Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold competing against each other week 1. They know that they're going to go with Zach Wilson moving forward, and Sam Darnold's time in New York has ended. Now, Here's why I like Sam Darnold more than other people. Now, Sam Darnold is a great divide between NFL circles of, is he good or is he bad? Now, again, there's a lot of guys you can give up on early. People have, gave up on Josh Rosen and things like that as well. But I don't think it's okay to give up on Sam Darnold because of a couple of reasons. One, he's super young. He is only 23 years old. He was the youngest player in his NFL draft. He came into the NFL at 20, played a full year at 21, full year at 22, and a full year at 23. So again, he's just 23 years old right now. Joe Burrow entered the NFL at 23. So that's what you have to keep in mind. Joe Burrow took a couple of years to really develop into a quarterback in general, not just an NFL player. And it was his senior season at LSU where things really decided to take off. But for Sam Darnold, he left early at 20, and he's now just becoming Joe Burrow's age when he left for the NFL. And again, he has struggled for sure, but it hasn't been all bad. So for a career, Sam Darnold has about a 60% completion percentage, a little over 8,000 yards, 45 touchdowns, 239 interceptions. He has a high interception thing, right? Okay, he's got 39 picks, which would translate to about a 3.2% interception percentage, which is not great. Does he turn the ball over? Sure. But there's a team, in my opinion, that should be all in on a guy like Sam Darnold. There's two. One is Denver, and the other is Carolina. If I were either of these teams, I would have called San Francisco and traded for Sam Darnold a week ago, a month ago, whenever he was available. But I think for Carolina, they are more focused on adding a already bona fide superstar in Deshaun Watson. I think they are the leaders in the clubhouse for the Deshaun Watson trade. Now that Miami has traded down to 6 and looks like to build around Tua Tagovailoa, and the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson. Now, when Deshaun Watson will be traded, that is a better question. He's going through some off-the-field sexual assault allegations. There's a good chance he gets put on the commissioner exempt list, which means he wouldn't be able to be traded or anything like that. The whole situation is unclear. And there have been a ton of reports about it recently, so I'm not sure exactly what the Deshaun Watson situation holds in the future. But I think that's who Carolina has identified as the guy they want to go after, or the draft. I don't think Denver wants to draft a quarterback. I think they like Drew Lock. They are not sold on Drew Lock. They don't know if he's the guy. He keeps having these weird seasons of starting poor and then sort of ending out the year strong on a high note and trying to convince himself to kind of, there's a big year coming or something like that. Guys do that a lot in the NFL. Fitzpatrick has done it. Like there's guys like that who are only good half of the season but convince you, oh, I'm good enough for the next year and things like that. The plan out of Denver seemed to be Sam Darnold, Drew Lock plus competition. That somebody needs to push Drew Lock to be better, and he's not going to be handed the starting job next year. I thought it would have been Ryan Fitzpatrick. That was my personal prediction, but he obviously goes to Washington. Sam Darnold would be perfect for Denver. John Elway has been high on Sam Darnold forever. There were rumors that during that draft that they wanted to desperately trade up for him. They get another crack at him at just 23 years old. Him and Drew Lock are almost the same age, and they both play a really similar style, actually. There's sort of like this reckless gunslinger aspect to them where they're going to take big-time plays, they're going to take big-time risk, but they're also going to make those big-time plays. And yes, there will be interceptions, but there will be, one or two wow plays a game, hopefully, if they reach their potential from a guy like Sam Darnold. Remember that big-time run he had last year? That sort of throw where he was running to his left. I forget who it was against. I want to say it was against San Francisco, but I'm not sure. Where he was running to his left and sort of flicked it with his right and really torqued his body all the way around for a touchdown to Braxton Berrios. That was pretty much Sam Darnold's career play. There was that game in 2019 versus the Dallas Cowboys where he absolutely lit them up. Now, there are concerns for Sam Darnold. He's never played all 16 games in a season. He only played 13 his rookie year, 13 in 2019, and only 12 in 2020. He obviously has a losing record as a quarterback. He went 13-25. But again, I think Sam Darnold is the perfect guy for Denver. I think that's exactly who should they target. And again, I think Sam Darnold is a better version of Drew Lock right now. I think he's more mobile than Drew Lock, and I think he's got a better arm than Drew Lock. But they play a similar style. John Elway clearly likes the traditional bigger quarterback. I don't think he's into smaller, undersized guys. Sam Darnold is 6'3", 225 pounds, and he likes sort of a gunslinger, reckless sort of attitude about it. I think that's exactly what John Elway's into. They fell in love with Drew Lock for a reason to take him in the second round. They thought he was a first-round talent. That's what they said after they drafted him. And if you bring in Sam Darnold, it's not also necessarily giving up on Drew Lock. Maybe your goal, if you're the Broncos as well, Sam Darnold is a guy that the fans are going to buy into if we play him out there. He's got a ton of potential and only 23 years old. So if Drew beats him out, that shows a lot about Drew Lock. And that would be Drew Lock taking a big step. So I think it's a win-win. either way for Denver. And best case scenario for the Denver Broncos is that you would have a backup, a young, cheap backup, may I mind you, on a rookie contract to back up the guy, Drew Lock or Sam Darnold, whoever starts, whoever's the backup. And again, they play a similar style, so you don't have two completely different playbooks for either one of these guys. You're going to get a similar play style, a similar stat line, probably for whoever you throw out there. It just depends on who you want starting. In my opinion, if the Denver Broncos, like it's been rumored, are going to trade for Sam Darnold, I don't think it would cost a lot either. I think max it would take a third-round pick. Apparently there's been value up to a fourth-round pick. I think the Jets probably want a first or a second. It wouldn't surprise me if they meet in the middle on a high third-round pick from Denver, so it'd be the 9th overall pick in the third round. Send that to the New York Jets. They acquire Sam Darnold, and they have Drew Lock and Sam Darnold compete. Now, if this happens, I would also go on record on the show saying that I think Sam Darnold's career would change immediately. And I think what Sam Darnold would do in Denver is similar to what Ryan Tannehill is doing in Tennessee. His career would be revived and they would go to the playoffs. I think the Broncos have all of these incredible offensive weapons when it comes from Melvin Gordon to a decent offensive line, but they could draft an O-lineman at 9, to a good defense with a good defensive head coach as well. Great weapons in Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Courtland Sutherland, Noah Fant. It already would be the best roster Sam Darnold's already played with. It's already going to be the best coach Sam Darnold's already played for. Best organization Sam Darnold's played for easily. Yes, that division is tough, but at the same time, Sam Darnold has already played in a tough division with, going against guys like the Bills and the Patriots and the Dolphins, so he's used to that, tough defenses, things like that as well. Big enough arm to throw in that cold altitude in Denver. And again, he's a playmaker. He does a lot of things off script. That's why I love Sam Darnold so much. Yes, there's the mistakes, there's the boneheaded plays, there's the interceptions, there's the real head scratcher throws. But again, he's just 23 years old. Wait till he develops out of those habits and you just see just the playmaking side. Again, Joe Burrow came into the NFL at 23. Sam Darnold is 23 with 3 years of NFL experience. That is something that cannot be understated or overstated, really. And I think if the Broncos pulled the trigger, and I would if I were John Elway, get the guy you loved so much in 2018 that you almost traded up for him back then, get him on the cheap for your third round pick, have him and Drew Lock battle out in camp. Don't hand the job to Sam Darnold, but also don't hand it to Drew Lock. Have a fair competition. Whoever does better gets that job. I think Sam Darnold would win it. I think he's a more talented and better version of Drew Lock, and I think he's a better playmaker as well. And that's no hate towards Drew Lock. I thought the Broncos were going to be a really, really good team this year. They were my pop team last year, but Drew Lock didn't really live up to my expectations. I think they need an upgrade at quarterback. Sam Darnold, in my opinion, would do that for him. All right, now I want to transition to the Miami Dolphins, who are going to have a dilemma with the 6th overall pick. Obviously, they traded down from 3 to 12, then back up to 6, obviously with a pass catcher in mind. Now, according to the Miami Herald, which is obviously very connected to the Miami Dolphins and everything like that, apparently their pick is down to 3 players already. It's going to be Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, or Kyle Pitts. Now, I want to remove Jamar Chase from this equation because I personally believe, and I've been hearing via Twitter and all those other sources, not my own personal sources, but just on reports and speculation, that it looks like Jamar Chase is actually being taken by the Bengals at 5. Initially, me and a lot of other people put in Penei Sewell as that guy they're going to take, the left tackle, to protect Joe Burrow, but they signed that guy, Riley Streif, I believe his name, from the Vikings, who will be playing right tackle, and they have Jonah Williams at left tackle, and Joe Burrow has gone to the general manager and the front office of the Cincinnati Bengals and said, get me Jamar Chase. He's the guy that I want us to select. I think they will listen to Joe Burrow, an organization that traditionally doesn't like to do things wrong, doesn't like to get bullied by the media, that has been really known as a not great organization for years and years. You got to remember, leading up to the draft, there were rumors that Joe Burrow might not want to play in Cincinnati, and Carson Palmer came out and said, if I were Joe Burrow, I would refuse to play there. Things like that. So they're going to want to listen to their young superstar quarterback, who's already been hurt because they haven't been able to protect him and has already lost a bunch of games, not to any fault of his own, where he's sort of had to carry the team and they lose close ones. So I don't want to piss off Joe Burrow anymore if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals. Not that he's already pissed off at them or anything, but you just don't want to start something later on down the line. Listen to your star quarterback, get the receiver. And again, it's not a bad pick either. It's not like Joe Burrow's recommending a guy that you would never even consider taking the top 5. It's Jamar Chase, who is a generational wide receiver prospect, according to guys like Daniel Jeremiah, and other guys at NFL Network and things like that. Incredible prospect. Reminds me of a faster Anquan Bolden. Electric, elite, and pairing him up with Joe Burrow again would just be a chef kiss. It'd be exactly what you want in a quarterback-wide receiver partnership. So I think the Bengals go there. So with the 6th overall pick, it's either going to be Devonta Smith or Jamar Chase. And this is a really, really tough question for the Miami Dolphins because this guy is going to arguably be the focal point of your offense the next 10 years with your quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. Yes, they have other guys like Devontae Parker and Will Fuller, who are both really, really nice players in my opinion. I think Mike Gesicki is on the cusp of being a top 10 NFL tight end right now and an all-pro when he can get the consistently. Mike Gesicki, about 5 games a year, gives you unstoppable Travis Kelce-esque tight end play, but just doesn't do it consistently for all 16 games just yet. He's a super young player still on his rookie contract. I think he'll eventually get there. So I think they have an already nice foundation on offense with Tua, Gesicki, Parker, and Fuller. I think they're going to add a running back in the draft after already signing Malcolm Brown. They have a nice young offensive line that will only get better as well. We know their defense is good. They need a stud pass catcher. They need the number one dominant offensive weapon. They need their Travis Kelce, their Darren Waller, their Tyreek Hill, their Devontae Adams, whoever it is, where it's one-on-one every week. This guy is better than your guy. We have a better guy than you. It's going to be Kyle Pitts or Devonta Smith. If I were the Miami Dolphins, I would take Kyle Pitts. I've said this time and time again. He reminds me of Calvin Johnson in tight end form, or Darren Waller, but better. I think he's going to be an absolute superstar in this league, and I understand that Tua does better with speed receivers, but Kyle Pitts gets more separation than you think, and he's just an absolute generational freak of nature pass catcher prospect. I don't want to label him as a tight end and receiver. He's both. He can do whatever you want on the line, in the slot, whatever you want to do. Another reason why I think Miami is going to take Pitts. I used to say I think I would take if I was Miami, I would take Pitts, and I don't think Miami's going to take Pitts. Does that make sense? According to reports and everything like that, it looked like they weren't going to take Kyle Pitts, but even though if I were Chris Greer, I would take Kyle Pitts. Now I'm starting to think that I would take Kyle Pitts, and Miami will be taking Kyle Pitts. After doing some research, Miami ran the 5th most 12-man personnel in the league, which means you play 2 tight ends a lot. And again, they've already addressed the speed receiver position in Will Fuller. I think they could be setting up for a guy who's just best player available. In my opinion, that would be Kyle Pitts. Not that I don't want to take anything away from Devonta Smith. He had one of the best receiver seasons in college football history. He's got that connection with Tua, and I don't want to rule that out as a possibility because there's a very, very real chance that the Bengals reunite Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and the Dolphins reunite Devonta Smith and Tua. That could be a real possibility, and I don't want to exclude it. But today, Brian Flores was at the pro day of Kyle Pitts and got to see the freak of nature himself in action, or the unicorn, whatever you want to call him. And again, Miami was top 5 in the NFL with 12-man personnel in the league. Only 4 teams ran more 2 tight end sets than Miami did last season. And I think Miami's going to be taking Kyle Pitts with the 6th overall pick in this draft. And I think it'll be an absolutely home run pick. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this final short break, I'll be getting into all of those major NBA headlines, and if we have time, I will be giving you my top 10 NBA players, but if we don't have time, I'll have to save that for the next episode. But either way, we'll be getting into some major NBA news and storylines coming up right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today's absolutely packed show. Again, if you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. In my last segment, I just gave you sort of a deep dive on the Sam Darnold situation and why I believe the Denver Broncos are a perfect match for him. Again, him and Drew Lock play a very similar style. I just think Sam Darnold is already better than Drew Lock at all of those things. Plus, he's got more NFL experience than Drew Lock. And I think he's a better athlete than Drew Lock as well. I think he's a bigger playmaker. And again, I was pretty high on Drew Lock last year. I thought the Broncos were going to be one of the surprise teams in the NFL. I love all of their offensive weapons. But if we're being honest, that team has a good enough defense and good enough offensive weapons and a good enough coach where the quarterback is holding them back at that point. And I think Sam Darnold, who has gone from a terrible situation with no weapons, no defense, no good coach, no structure in the front office with the Jets, goes to a structured organization with the same ownership group. Obviously, John Elway's still there. Obviously, great defense with Von Miller, some veterans, some real playmakers on that offense with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. It'd be like a night and day change for Sam Darnold. And he wasn't good for the New York Jets, but I don't think he was horrible, and I don't think he was the reason why they were losing games. And he certainly made a lot of plays in those games where the Jets won. If you look at every single Jets win that Sam Darnold was a part of, and I would say is that you would say he was the best player on that offense. I really do believe that. He carried them to a lot of wins. Again, not many, but a lot of their wins. Put him in a good situation with better weapons, better front office, all those good things. And watch Sam Darnold take off. I really do believe that. I want to transition now to the NBA and get sort of like a rapid fire of a bunch of NBA topics that are going on right now. I don't think we're going to get to the top 10 NBA players in the league segment today. We will do that in our next episode. So we got about three or four things to talk about here in the NBA. The first one being Andre Drummond making his debut for the Los Angeles Lakers. Yesterday when you're listening to this, the game has not started when I'm recording this, so I don't know how he did. But can we just please ease up on the Andre Drummond hype train? I understand that he was signed by LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, and I'm not a LeBron hater. If anything, I'm a LeBron supporter. I think he's got a real path to the championship and the greatest of all time and everything like that. So I'm not like a LeBron hater like Skip Bayless or anything like that. But I don't think Andre Drummond in the buyout market was a season-changing move for the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't think Andre Drummond is going to be the difference between winning a championship and not. I think he's a good player, and I think the Lakers have used a player like him multiple times. They've had Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, and he might be a better version of Dwight Howard / JaVale McGee, but he's going to play that same role, and I don't think Andre Drummond's going to walk in to the Los Angeles Lakers and start averaging 20 and 10 a game. And again, this is all stemming from Jeannie Buss, who the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers released a photo comparing, she didn't mean to, I don't know necessarily, but she essentially put out a photo of her welcoming Andre Drummond to the Los Angeles Lakers, like in the building and everything like that, and put it side by side to her father, Mr. Buss, obviously, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And if we can all agree that Andre Drummond is not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I understand that they're two big men who like to block shots and get points in the paint, but they're not even close to the same player. I don't want to hear it. So when it comes to Andre Drummond, I think he's going to serve a good role for the Lakers. I think he's going to be a legitimate player for them, for sure, and I think he's going to serve a major role. As they've already said, Frank Vogel is going to be playing him over 30 minutes a game, according to the coaching staff, and of course Frank Vogel, and he's going to be playing legitimate minutes for them day in, day out. He is their starting center. Anthony Davis is their starting power forward. That's how it's going to work for the next sort of rest of the year, really. And I think he's a good fit next to Anthony Davis. Again, we've seen JaVale McGee work. We've seen Dwight Howard sort of work out there as well. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to work out for the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, is he the difference between winning and losing a championship? No. Could he maybe win you a game here and there? Sure. Will he give you a 20-20 game every now and then? Sure. But I don't think he's the reason why the Lakers are going to win a championship. He also doesn't stop the Lakers from free-falling in the standings, which is what's going to happen, which is what's currently happening now and will be happening over the next couple of weeks. Because of LeBron James and Anthony Davis injuries, those guys are not playing for them currently, and that's really their whole team. It's their whole offense. They're going to lose a bunch of games because of it, and they could drop all the way to 7th or 8th in the West, in my opinion. Andre Drummond is not stopping that. That's going to happen whether Drummond's on the roster or not. Again, can we just ease up a little bit on the Andre Drummond hype train again? This was a guy who was struggling to find a role at the end of his time in Detroit, struggling to find a role at the end of his time in Cleveland, two not good teams. Now I'm supposed to believe that he's the difference between the LA Lakers winning and losing a championship. I don't think so. I think he's a nice player. I think he was a positive addition for sure, but I don't know if he is a game changer necessarily or a season-changing move. The next thing I want to talk about is Kevin Durant, who recently has gotten in some hot water for going back and forth with Michael Rappaport in Twitter DMs or Instagram DMs, and he said some really bad things about him, and it was back and forth, and there was a complete argument. Rappaport didn't really respond to him, at least in the DMs that he put on social media, and I want to talk about Kevin Durant because he's out another week because of a hamstring injury. Kevin Durant always gets compared to LeBron James. It's always been KD, LeBron, and Kevin Durant, his entire NBA career has been chasing LeBron James, the similar way to guys where almost like LeBron's been chasing Jordan. Kevin Durant is never going to be LeBron James. He's not LeBron James physically, and he's not LeBron James mentally. Kevin Durant now, in the last 2 years, has had more injuries than LeBron James has had his entire career. You also don't see LeBron James going on social media, tweeting at these guys, trashing reporters in Instagram DMs or whatever Michael Rappaport is. And again, this is not me defending Michael Rappaport. I don't know a lot about him. I don't know if he necessarily deserved to get those DMs or not. But either way, a professional athlete constantly going at this guy in an Instagram DM is not ideal for the face of the Brooklyn Nets and arguably the second best player in basketball, Kevin Durant. Does he have the freedom to do that? For sure. But in my opinion, this is the difference between LeBron and KD and why LeBron is the ultimate foundational piece versus Kevin Durant sort of being on, 3 different teams in his entire career and has always had this narrative of you're not the guy. It's because of this. He doesn't have this leadership quality, and he's not necessarily relied upon physically anymore. I'm not trying to say he's injury prone. He wasn't injured that much early in his career, but ever since the Achilles, he hasn't played that much for Brooklyn, and this is his second year now, and I think he's only played about 20 games for Brooklyn in 2 years while making a ton of money and everything like that. Will he be ready eventually? Yes. Will I think he'll deliver in the playoffs? For sure. But can we stop with the LeBron and Kevin Durant comparisons? They're not comparable in my opinion. LeBron James is the best player on the planet. He will be for the foreseeable future in my opinion. Kevin Durant's never going to be able to catch up to him or even really get on that same level. It doesn't matter how many times they face off each other in the finals, and I understand that the Warriors have beat the Cavs multiple times. At least they did back then. But just from everything physically, mentally, Kevin Durant is not LeBron James. And that's not what he has to be. But at the end of the day, we keep seeing every year now stories about KD on social media and things like that. That's just not what, in my opinion, franchise players do. That's not what top 5 in the world players do, which is trash people on social media and things like that. So I didn't love that from Kevin Durant, not to mention he's doing all that while not even playing right now with another injury. He hasn't played a lot of games for Brooklyn. And again, we're all just waiting for Brooklyn to come together and play this big 3 and see how it does. I think it's a real question of how many times are we going to see all 3 of them together. Because at this point, Kyrie can't stay on the court. KD can't stay healthy either right now. Kyrie's obviously been on the court more consistently than he was at the beginning of the year. But the only guy who's coming in, day out for the Brooklyn Nets is James Harden, and he's the guy they acquired last. So in my opinion, I'm a little bit worried about Brooklyn when it comes to a durability standpoint. Because again, we've seen these teams take a bunch of these games off and to have a lot of rest like the Clippers did last year, and it didn't do them any well. They didn't even get to their conference finals. So I'm a little bit worried about the Brooklyn Nets going forward because of that. And the final thing I do want to talk about in today's show is Zion Williamson. A lot of people have been talking about, has he been living up to the hype? It's just been a discussion point. I just want to say it's fascinating. I'm not saying anybody isn't saying he's lived up to the hype. He's obviously clearly lived up to the hype. But I just wanted to say a couple of crazy stats. At 20 years old, Zion Williamson is already averaging 26 points per game, 4 assists per game, almost a full block per game as well at about 0.7, a full steal a game, only 2.4 turnovers, and again, he's averaging 26 points on 62% field goal percentage. He is quite literally the most efficient player in the NBA right now, which is absolutely ludicrous to think about, that a 20-year-old kid can already be the most efficient player in basketball. If you look up advanced analytics, the most consistent play that's going to get you a point in the NBA right now is a Zion Williamson post-up move, which is absolutely ridiculous, or Zion Williamson layup. He is already one of the best, if not the best paint players in the entire league. In my opinion, he is just, if not already reached, he's either just outside or already reached top 10 player status in the NBA. I think he is that good and that special. And we expected this. He came into the NBA as, supposed to be the next Charles Barkley or everything like that. I saw somebody compare him to Karl Malone. I think that's a really great comparison as well. He does have a lot of physical attributes that are similar to Charles Barkley. But in all honesty, I think we should just throw away all of the Zion Williamson comparisons because he is the first Zion Williamson. I don't think we've ever seen a 6'6" sort of guy be the most dominant paint player in the NBA, because that's what I think Zion Williamson is heading to be. If he's not already there, I don't know if you can list 5 more players that are better than Zion Williamson in the paint in the NBA right now. It's absolutely awesome to watch. Again, only 20 years old, averaging 26 points on 62% field goal percentage. Zion Williamson is electric and one of the best NBA players to watch. He's so much fun. I'll get to one more thing. I do want to talk about the DeMarcus Cousins signing of a 10-day contract with the LA Clippers. Again, similar to the Andre Drummond role, I don't know how much of a role he's going to play. I think Drummond will play a bigger role with the Lakers than Cousins will play with than the Clippers. But again, the Clippers made a lot of interesting moves, bringing in Rondo and now Cousins, letting go of Lou Williams. It's going to be interesting to see how that season plays out. The Clippers of old are completely dismantled now. This is a completely new generation of a Clippers team in theory. Like when you go back to see that team that pushed the Warriors to 7 games, you saw Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Pat Beverly. Pat Beverly's really the only guy left, and he doesn't serve that big of a role on that Clipper team. They just drafted a guy just got a guy that's really going to play his role and more in Rajon Rondo, who's just a better version of Patrick Beverly, in my opinion. So the Clippers will be interesting for sure, but I don't know how much of a role DeMarcus Cousins is necessarily going to play with that team. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he didn't get a whole lot of minutes. Again, it's just a 10-day contract. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, we would appreciate it if you would do all three of those things. Again, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I have been your host, Alex Masfer, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.